Good deal. Good deal. Thank you, Miss Jackson. All right. Again, I want to welcome you all to this impromptu Zoom session. It has been a crazy, um, chaotic, nerve-wracking week. And I apologize for this change in venue at the last minute last week. So for those of you who do know, for those of you who don't know, one of my family members tested positive for COVID, and as soon as we got the test results, I immediately went into. I didn't go into panic mode, but we did, change the way we do things, and we quarantined ourselves here. None of us have been out. None of the kids have gone to school. Um, and turns out that my middle child is the one that tested positive after suffering what we thought initially was a severe sinus infection. Soon as she lost her taste and smell, it was pretty much um, a, an indication at that point that we had something different here. So, what I can tell you is that no one else in my household has thankfully come down with any symptoms or is possibly infected. Um, and we isolated my child to, prevent any kind of spread of the infection. She has gone through her quarantine period. She's now recovered, not showing any signs at all. Again, it was very, very mild, much different than anything that I expected, and different than anything that's been um, presented on television. Not downplaying it, but I'm just saying we dodged a major bullet here. But as I talked to Dr. Price and Dr. Stevens last week, I thought it was in your best interest, and of course, mine, to shift this class into a Zoom environment for this week, and prevent any other possible spread. Because even though I'm asymptomatic and not showing any signs at all, don't even believe I'm infected. There's so much we don't know about this virus, and it just caused me a lot of anxiety in that. What should I do here? Should I continue to go back, or should quarantine? I decided to quarantine was the right approach. Um, just to err on the side of caution, and thankfully, I realized that's the right choice. Again, it's a little inconvenient because we all, you know, um, met on a weekly basis. And I think we've gotten a lot from that. And it's, as I've said time and time again, English classes do require um, the classroom, uh, because you're allowed to connect with one another and exchange ideas and perspective in a more intimate and personal way in the classroom versus this online environment. Um, but considering this current situation, I just wasn't comfortable um, moving forward in back in the classroom before the quarantine is lifted. So according to the health department, we are under quarantine until the 8th of November. And if none of us are showing any kind of symptom or signs or worry, we're all free to return to our normal activities within reason after the 8th of November. And so I anticipate that this Zoom session will only last for today. That we will be back in the classroom environment next week. Now, if in the event between now and the 8th something changes, is if I become sick, or even if it's a sinus infection, I'm going to quarantine myself further until I'm better. Just in the event, I'm not going to take any chances with your health, because even though that this class is important with the course objectives, those very important things we have to accomplish, your personal health is more important to me than that. So, you know, if something changes between now and Sunday, I will let you know. Now, again, as I've told my 101 class, many of them showed up last night to the classroom, and they admitted to the administrator up there they had no clue. Well, it's because they weren't checking their email. I've sent out several emails over the course of this week, reminding people, you know, this is what the situation is. This is what's going on. So again, I think you all, as indicated this morning, you check your email regularly. That's a great thing. Continue to do so, because like I said, if something changes between now and Sunday, I will pull the trigger on continuing this Zoom environment in order to, you know, keep yourself safe and keep me from, you know, infecting anyone. Right now, now is not the time to do that. So anyway, just keep connected to your email. And like I said, if things change, I will let you know. And but as of right now, I anticipate we will meet. We will resume our class meeting next week, which will be the 10th of November. We'll resume our classroom meetings next week. So anyway, that's an update on my personal situation. Again, I apologize deeply if this was an inconvenience. It's not easy to shift things like this unexpectedly, but unfortunately, right now, this is the world we live in, and you know, we just have to err on the side of caution to make sure that, you know, we stop the spread of this virus as much as we can. All right. Does anybody have anything for me before we get started? Okay. So let me go in to share my screen here real quick. Bring up the course content from Blackboard. Let's see, what do we have on the table for the rest of the month? Well, you're looking good here. All the reading responses should be done. Again, if you have not turned in a reading response, you still have some time to do so. It's not like that I'm going to deny you the ability to submit an assignment that you missed. Of course, I can't give you full credit for it. I can give you partial credit. So if you haven't completed one of these assignments yet, go ahead and get it done, turn it in, and get the points that are available to you. And just to make sure that, you know, we're not at a deficiency before the end of the semester. Now, the poetry assignment, again, for those of you who haven't been to class in a while, the poetry essay is due this Sunday, the 8th of November. I did extend that from the 1st of November to give people extra time. As I can see right here on the screen, we've had a lot of people update their discussion board posts. I'll go in there today and grade those and give you the points that you've earned by participating in the discussions. Again, I appreciate everybody participating, and I hope you've gotten a lot from that, from sharing ideas with other students. Again, with this type of course, it's important that you share insight and share perspectives, because, you know, what you individually perceive from a reading is not necessarily the full context, the full spectrum. And sometimes a fellow classmate or a professor or even a family member or friend can clue you in on some things that you happen to miss upon that first reading or second reading. And so these discussion boards, again, you know, of course, they're there to give you some extra points for participation, but more importantly, they're there to help you generate ideas for your paper and topics and subtopics that you really want to address in the context of your essay. So again, just a general reminder: this essay is a 2-part essay. All right. So what you required to do is to select a poet from one of the required readings. And it has to be a poet from one of the required readings. I had a student who started this process for a few weeks now, and the student selected a poet that was listed in the book that we did not cover. And I'm like, whoa, she got 2 weeks into that process before, communicated that to me. And I told the student, I said, whoa, you have to pick one of the poets that we discussed. So just make sure the topic for your paper is definitely one of the poets that we've discussed over the course of this semester. And once you've identified that poet and the poem you want to talk about, your essay will be, again, 2-part. First part will be a biographical section, telling me about who that poet was, where they grew up, what kind of environment did they grow up in and live in and work. What were some of the political, cultural, religious, economical, etc. Aspects that possibly influenced that person's writing. All of those things are important, right? As we've learned, we're shaped and molded by the environment in which we grow up in and live in. And especially for writers and poets and playwrights, that's more so, because whether they consciously do it or subconsciously, all of those influences shape and mold the works, the topics, the themes, the characters, the plots. All of those things shape the stories and the poems and the plays that they're writing. And you want to capture that in that biographical section. Okay, so again, the part 1 of your essay, the beginning, should be a biographical section about that poet and talking about some of the cultural, religious, economic, political influences on that poet's work. Okay. Now, the second part of that essay is going to be analytical about the work or works themselves. And what do I mean by works? Well, I'm giving you the option. Of course, you have to talk about the work that we discussed from that poet this semester, but to further illustrate some of the elements that you want to discuss in your analytical section, you are welcome to bring in some other poems by that poet that further illustrate the use of those themes and concepts and imagery and symbolism as impacted by what you talked about in the biographical section. Okay, so again, part 1 is going to directly influence the things that you're going to be talking about in part 2, which are the elements that you're analyzing within those works. All of the religious and cultural and political things of the day in which that poet lived are all going to shape and mold the analytics, the metrics that you're going to be evaluating in part 2. Okay, especially when you're talking about symbolism and themes that are present in the work. Shakespeare being a good example of that, with Queen Elizabeth on the throne, and then when she dies, moving on to King James. The political environment of that day, the chaotic and uncertain transition in power, really influenced a lot of Shakespeare's works. The symbols, the themes, and the imagery that's evoked in that. And not only that, but also the cultural norms of the day. What were their perceptions on love and family and social interactivity. All of those things will shape those poems and the topics and themes that you'll be discussing in those as well. Okay, so once you get through that section, then you're going to kind of go back and summarize everything you talked about and have a re-emphasis on that thesis down at the bottom. Whatever you wanted to say about that poem or about that poet, why did certain influences shape and mold that poet and the poems wrote during that time period? You're going to go back in that conclusion and wrap that up and re-emphasize that. Okay, so again, 2-part essay. part one being biographical, part two being analytical. And then once you wrap that up, that'll be a good demonstration of your um, awareness and your appreciation for the concepts that we talked about during the poetry section of the course. And for those of you who hated this section and know who you are, um, maybe this is the last time you have to actually take a class on poetry again, and then this will be your last two. Yep. Thumbs up there. She is very excited at the prospect of never having to write another paper about poetry again, and that's fine. I don't laugh at you. I'm laughing at the situation. That's one of the wonderful things about literature. It's such a broad spectrum, and there's a broad range of genres and techniques and styles. If you don't like one, there's probably another one out there that you do like, and that's the beautiful thing about literature. It is a broad spectrum, so unlike some other disciplines, you're not just forced to go down one track. You've got various different tracks that you can go down and explore, and really dive deeply into the study of that genre. So that's one of the things that I just absolutely genuinely love about this field. Uh, I tend not to focus so much on poetry myself, unless it's epic poetry like Beowulf or the Iliad and the Odyssey. But again, it all comes down to personal taste. So, but I do appreciate, especially those of you like Ms. Holloway who did not enjoy poetry at all. Even though you don't enjoy it, showing an appreciation for it allows you to do really well and be successful. And I appreciate the efforts that each and every one of you have put into this section, despite the difficulty and the mundaneness of it. Hopefully the next section won't be that much of a chore for you. And I don't think it will. I think this is with drama, the plays, it's kind of a blend between the two. And for those of you who really enjoyed the fiction but hated the poetry, or you hated the fiction and enjoyed the poetry, this one might be a one size fits all here. Hopefully, we'll see. Once we get to the end of this section, I'll kind of go back and give a little poll and see what people's general feeling and perspective is on the play. But I do think that it will be across the board more welcome and received than the previous two, because it's not as polarizing. Okay, you're going to see a blend of both, the best aspects of both present in this section. All right, so before I get started in the introduction, again, today this is an introduction into drama and playwriting. We specifically call it drama for a reason, and then you will see as you progress through Hamlet, there's a reason why we title it drama, because that's what this whole thing is about. Conflict and opposing wills and scheming and conniving in order to achieve your own personal goal. You're going to see that present in this work. Everybody's got an agenda. And if you're a fan of the Game of Thrones, you're going to see some of the same concepts here, that everybody's got an agenda and nobody's really forthright and honest with each other, because there's a lot of a lot of conflicts going on here in the story of Hamlet. And but before we deep dive into it, we got to have a set of metrics, just like with fiction and poetry. We have to have a defined set of metrics before we start to deep dive into it and analyze it. You got to have a measuring stick there. And what I want to do right now, I want to pause and allow anyone to ask a question or make a comment about the poetry section if you wish. I'm going to turn a fan on in here. As you can see, I'm in a bedroom because of the quarantine. I've had to change from my office area because it happens to also double up as a bedroom for my middle child. So I had to move into this environment, and it's not exactly accommodating for a work environment right now. But let me go turn a fan on. If anybody has a question or a comment, please, either type it in the chat real quick or feel free to come on the microphone. Let me walk over here and turn this fan on because it's starting to warm up in this room real quick. All right. So like I said, thankfully it's starting to warm back up. I'm not a fan of cold weather at all. I'm a South Alabama, Northwest Florida guy. I love the heat. I love the humidity. And anytime it gets below 80 degrees, I get a little upset. And as you can probably guess, past couple of mornings, not been a happy camper. I'm ready for this to get out of here. I want my 80 degrees back. 60 at night, that's good. That's about as low as I can go at night, but I'm ready for the heat and humidity to come back. Okay. So nobody had any questions in the group chat? Nobody come up? All right. So let's deep dive real quick. And I'm going to kill this screen up here. I'm going to stop sharing this because what I want to do is I want to bring up a whiteboard and draw. And I'm not the best at this. So Zoom, I'm an old school guy. I don't really understand all this newfangled technology just yet. I should, but I don't. And I tend to slip up from time to time using this whiteboard feature. So if something doesn't look right or if I get something off, please let me know, bring it to my attention, and I'll go in and correct it. But being an old school guy, I enjoy the physical classroom where I can walk around and write on the board. This is just a foreign environment for me. All right, so drama. Again, drama with the playwriting. This is a section that really kind of wraps up in a unique way some of the concepts and the principles that we talked about in the first two sections. Okay, so now you probably understand the flow a little bit better. We started off with fiction and used a certain set of elements to analyze those types of works. Then we moved into poetry and used a different set of metrics and elements to analyze that style of writing. Now we're going to take both of those and we're going to merge them together and utilize important aspects of both camps in our pursuit to understand how to interpret dramatic works. Okay, so as the name indicates, drama in relation to the human element, drama is the thing that really makes the world go around at some points, especially the world of literature. Without drama, without some type of conflict, as I've said over and over before, especially in the fiction section, if you don't have some kind of conflict there, you really don't have an interesting story at all, right? So you have the protagonist, the character or characters that you really closely identify with, and you're almost becoming an advocate for. You're cheering them on, you're rooting them on, you want them to accomplish their goals and objectives and maybe overcome a certain obstacle. And usually in their way is some type of antagonist that's working against them. If it's a good story, what we call, with lack of a better term, a good story, a well-written story, an entertaining story, a thought-provoking story, it will have that kind of setup in there where you have this type of conflict. Again, if the characters are just sitting around on the park bench and everything's good. The world is in the right place. The grass is green, the sun is shining, and they're just sitting around sipping on their coffee in the morning with nothing to do for the day. That's not a very interesting type of story. Nobody wants to read that. And especially if you're wanting to write that type of story, nobody's going to buy that book off Amazon or in the bookstore. Okay. That book's going nowhere. People, even those who profess to abhor drama, crave it on some level. Okay. Because without it, there's really no point, especially when it comes to stories. There's no point to the story without that. So there has to be a purpose. There has to be an objective. There has to be a goal in mind for that character or for those characters, those protagonists, in order for you to become engaged with them, in order to almost root them on. And you're reading through the story or the play to really see where this is going. And you just, you're rooting them on while you're traversing through the plot from point A to point B. Without drama, there's no point. Okay. So the most important element that, and there's going to be several, but I think the most important element that we're going to talk about again is drama, but we're going to kind of fall back a little bit and fall back on these previous sections and pull in some elements that's going to help us to get to that point. Okay. Now, with a play, you're going to notice that there's an absence of something that's unique to fiction. Okay. And this is going to cause one of the elements to, in your analysis of this element, to really come to the forefront. You're going to put a lot of thought into analyzing this element. All right. So we're going to call this the drama elements. And I'm going to skip down here real quick. I'm going to move this up and I'm going to create a list here. So one of the first elements in drama that you're going to look at, of course, is character. Of course, right? Got to have characters in a play. You got to have those characters. Without the characters, there's really no point to the play at all. And the reason why character is going to be extremely important is because, unlike fiction, dramatic plays do not have this lengthy exposition or introduction that kind of warms you up as a reader to give you an idea of where are you, what are the characters doing, where are they located, what their motivations are, or what their background is. You're not going to have, you're going to have a little bit of that, but you're not going to have that in depth as you have in fiction. And in some ways, drama with a play is almost like you're taking the writer or the playwright is taking you as the reader and the audience and picking you up and dropping you right in the middle. And your job within the first couple of acts is going to be to figure out where you are, who these people are, why am I here, how in the hell I got here, and why is this important? Okay. And with the absence of exposition, you're going to have to dive into the dialogue that is presented by the characters in order to figure out those clues. Okay. So there's going to be a little bit of detective work on your part to identify those aspects that are more self-evident in a piece of fiction, in prose. Because the dramatic plays do not have this exposition, lengthy exposition, you're going to have to do a little bit of detective work. Now, in the case of Shakespeare, what Shakespeare usually likes to do is to offer you a sonnet at the beginning. And for those of you who have read Romeo and Juliet, either in high school or on your own, or you've seen the movie adaptations of that story, Shakespeare starts it off with a small exposition, right? There's that sonnet that happens at the very beginning of Romeo and Juliet, where he says, two households, both alike in dignity in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Okay, so there, right there, within the introduction of that play, the narrator gives you a little bit of exposition there. They tell you where the story's taking place, who the characters are going to be, or in a general sense, he tells you who those characters are going to be. There's two different households, two families, both alike in dignity, both have same social standing, but they're in a conflict with one another. And then he's also going to foreshadow what that conflict brings about, or what impacts and tragic events that conflict brings about in that play. Hamlet, I don't know if you noticed, but Hamlet has an absence of that. And there is no explanation for why that is. Either it's just because there was a different style, or maybe Shakespeare didn't have the full background available to him when he adapted this story to a play. But what we do have here is an absence of an exposition to kind of give you that background story. But what he does, what Shakespeare does here, is he does give you a little bit, there gives you a little small tagline at the front where he says, the action takes place in or near the royal castle of Denmark at Elsinore. So there, right there, is about as much exposition as you're going to get from Shakespeare. So what do you have to fall back on? Well, you have to fall back on the characters, number one. And thankfully, within this play, Shakespeare kind of lays this out for you. Who are the characters? So in a play, you always start off the bill, and that's what we call it, a play bill. You always start the bill off with a list of characters that are going to be that you're going to interact with indirectly, either through the reading or in the theater, that are going to participate in this play. Okay, so character is going to be an element that you're really going to focus in on. You're going to get a little bit of the background from the description in the beginning, but what you're going to have to do is, to understand character, you're going to have to pay close attention, especially in the first act. Pay close attention to the words and phrases that indicate motives and attitudes held by the characters. Okay. So again, that's just a loose interpretation here, a loose definition. But within the absence of that exposition and prose in the beginning of the play, you're really going to have to focus in on the characters and listen to them. Sometimes you may want to sit back, and once a character says something, think about it in the context of what is that character saying, and to whom is he saying it. What is the, can you pick up on some of the motivation? One of the things that could help you is to go ahead and, as soon as you form an image of that character, write that down, make a little notation off to the side of, I think this character is this type of person, or this character possesses these types of traits, so I think this character is going to be motivated to do this or that. And then when you're reading through the play, you can go back and revisit your initial perception, or that first impression, and then kind of analyze it and measure it to where you currently are versus where you were in the beginning. That'll kind of give you a more in-depth view into who these characters are, and do a little bit of, like I said, you're going to have to do a little bit of detective work. It's not going to be apparent at first who they are. So you're going to have to write down little clues here and there and make notes of anything that stands out in your mind that doesn't either make sense or that you think is really, really important in the definition of that character. And then make sure that you revisit that list from time to time, from act to act, maybe not from scene to scene, but maybe look at it from act to act to say, okay, does this perception that I have this character, does it still ring true? Is there anything that's happened in the succeeding acts that either contradict it or back it up? That's going to be extremely important when you get to writing your paper, because when you're analyzing character in your paper, you're going to analyze them over the course of the play. Who are they when they started out in Act 1? What did they say or do from Act 2 to 3? And moving on to Act 5 here. Okay, so make notes of character traits, especially the more important characters, the main character. Make notes of character traits and actions throughout the play. Okay, just for those of you who are, you know, if you're taking notes, great, but I will download this after I get finished today. I'll download this whiteboard and throw it up on the blackboard for you. So if you don't happen to have, you know, access to note taking right now, or you're too busy, you know, listening, that's fine. I'll make this available on the blackboard for you today. All right. So again, character, just like fiction, you want to pay a close attention to the words and phrases to indicate, you know, to get an idea for what their motivations are, their attitudes, and then make notes of those character traits and actions throughout the play. In the absence of exposition, it's going to be extremely important, because you're not going to have a narrator off making consistent commentary about these characters. Like you see that in fiction. You always have that third person narrator ever present to make commentary, or to offer commentary about the scene and the characters and whatnot, to kind of give you a little perspective in that. You don't have that here in drama. Okay, it's specifically about the characters. You may have a narrator come in from time to time at the beginning of an act to kind of give you some perspective on what has changed or what has shifted, but they're not going to offer you analysis like you would have in fiction. So that analysis is going to have to come from you. And again, you know, as we traverse through the play, all of us are going to have questions or comments or observations that we want to share. And that's going to be extremely important to help everybody else in the class pick up on things that may have been missed, especially in the absence of narration and exposition. Okay. All right. So first one we have here is character. The second one, as you probably have guessed, is going to be setting. Okay. The setting is going to be as just like cursor moved. Same as in fiction. Okay. And again, the setting is usually going to be given right there at the beginning of the play. In fact, before each act begins, there should be, if there's a change in venue, there should be a little notation in there to alert you that, hey, we started off in this location, now we've shifted to this location. And so those settings between each of the acts and the overall setting for the whole play is going to be extremely important to make note of. In Hamlet's case, this one takes place in Denmark. So you're going to have some cultural traits that may be uniquely Danish, but you also have to remember that this is being written by an English playwright. So it's not necessarily going to be truly indicative of the Danish culture and the Danish landscape and the Danish politics and etc. Shakespeare is going to Englishify it, for the lack of a better term. He's going to make it English. So you're going to have some changes there in the traits of the setting that you're going to have to be aware of as you're analyzing the setting of this play. Now, much like fiction, again, the setting is going to give you clues as to the culture, the religious, the political, the societal, um, the environmental, etc. There's going to be a lot of different sub elements that you're going to have to make note of, or you may want to be aware of in the setting of this play. Okay. And they're all going to play an influence and a role. Now, not just the physical location, but also the location in which the playwright is composing this work as well. It's going to be a melting pot, right? Most of Shakespeare's plays take place somewhere else. With the exception of his histories written about monarchies, most of his plays are written about characters in a setting that takes someplace else. But that doesn't mean that there's not some kind of English influence that's present there. So that's gonna take some explanation, and we'll look at that as we traverse through the different acts of the plays. And when there is a indication that the cultural significance has changed from the actual setting of the play to the cultural influences of the playwright, we'll make those notations and bring that to the forefront when they come up. But again, setting, just like in fiction, is going to play an important role in your understanding what is going on here and where is it taking place in the context of this play. Okay. All right. Now, the third one, of course, if we were in a classroom, I'd probably ask you all, give me what is the third one going to be? And you probably instinctively already know what it is, but of course, theme, right? Theme. What is this play about? Why is this play important to study? And what are some of the motifs, the symbolism that's present in the work that kind of give you an indication of what the overall theme of this play is? Again, once we deep dive into Hamlet, that theme will become more and more apparent. But starting off, you're not gonna understand. You know, what are we talking about here, and why are we talking about it? It's not going to be so self-evident up front. That's unlike some fiction stories where the third-person narrator, through the author, through that third-person narrator, can immediately kind of give you an idea of what the story is about in the introduction and the exposition of it. But in a play, there's an absence of that. So it's going to be important that you pick up on certain symbols and sayings and cultural traits to kind of pick up on what the theme of this play is. And again, what is this play about, and why is it important? Okay, and in the nature of a play, we're talking about a bunch of characters in a certain place trying to accomplish some type of goal, but it's all centered around one other important element that's going to help define the rest of these. And really, this one should be at the top, but I'm reversing the order because it's very important to understand that, you know, we're building up these elements to show a relationship here. And so that fourth and final one probably is going to be the most important one because we are talking about drama, and that is in the presence of conflict. Okay, there is a conflict here, especially in Shakespearean plays. The more dramatic plays are going to have some type of conflict. All right. And that's going to be executed by the characters and the setting, through the setting, and bound together by a certain theme is going to give you the overall context and shape of this conflict that's building up here. All right. So understanding conflict, you're going to want to look at some different things here. Who are the protagonists? Okay. What are their motivations and goals? And then you're going to do the same thing for who are the antagonists. What are their motivations? I'm a horrible typer if you have not noticed this already in goals. Okay. Now, understanding who the protagonists are, what their motivations and goals are, and how those align with or against, not with, but against the antagonists and their motivations and goals are really going to set the stage for what kind of conflict you're going to see coming down the road. And again, it's not going to be self-evident just in the beginning of the play. You're going to have to really listen to who the characters are, understand who they are and the words that they're using. Do they tell the truth? Do they deceive? Are they manipulating people? Are they really genuinely trying to work with people? All of those things are going to give you clues as to who these characters are. And then once you separate them into groups and look at separate them into protagonists versus antagonists, that's going to give you, along with the setting, a general sense and general understanding of what conflict is about to happen, or what conflict is about to take place at some point in this play. And it'll also give you an indication of how severe this conflict could be if things really got out of hand, right? Again, we're talking about human beings. We're talking about the human element. We are logical creatures, but we're also emotional creatures at that. Sometimes we allow our emotions, our pathos, to take over and to impact and influence our judgment and decision making. And that unique characteristic that all makes us all humans really impacts the severity and the impactfulness of conflict overall. You know, on a grand, is it going to be on a small scale, or is it going to be on a grand scale here, or is this going to be wide ranging and ever impacting over across all the characters in this play? So once you get to that point, you're going to understand who the protagonists are, what their goals and motivations are, along with the antagonists. Then you're going to analyze, or you're going to look for indications of a coming conflict. And again, different playwrights use different styles. God, I just cannot type today. Coming conflict or conflicts, right? Okay. Different playwrights and different writers are going to use different styles. Some are going to be more straight to the point and allow, you know, these small flare-ups to happen and then move on. And in some cases, a play may be set up a little differently. You may have this little skirmish here or there, but that combined these combined instances or occurrences can lead up to something that really becomes catastrophic in the end. In other words, the pot on, you put a pot of water on a stove. If you only turn up the temperature, say halfway, you're going to get a little bit of rising action there, and the molecules are going to be agitated and they're going to be moving around. But it's not boiling over at that point. It's very hot in the fire in the pot, but it's not enough to make the whole thing blow up. Versus if you really turn up the temperature all the way to high, that water is going to heat up. The molecules are going to react in a faster pace and a more violent pace to the point where that water boils. And if you try to put a lid on it, what happens? Well, it starts to pop off. In other words, the whole thing starts to explode. A play is very similar to that. Depending on, metaphorically speaking, depending on the setting of the temperature that the playwright puts into effect here, really will determine the overall severity and catastrophic nature of the coming conflict that the playwright's working towards. Usually that happens somewhere in between Act 3 and Act 5 with Shakespeare. Okay, but as with dramatic conflicts that happen in our lives, there's usually some kind of catalyst, right? A catalyst, or a striking of the flint, so to speak. Striking of the flint. That's a good little metaphor. That sets the scene in motion, or that puts the stage in motion for a coming conflict. Okay, the catalyst ignites the beginning stages of conflict between characters. Okay, now that conflict, that catalyst, can take place at the very beginning of the play, or you may start off with the play and everything seems to be okay, but then something happens. Either a character says something or does something that really starts and you stands out in your mind. You can see it. They're like, oh God, okay, why did they do that? Now things are going to start spiraling out of control. That's what we call that catalyst moment, where the striking of the flint really ignites that beginning stage of conflict. Okay, now you're going to analyze in the conflict element. There are 3 stages. Okay, stage number 1 is the rising action, and the rising action is, in a nutshell, is a series of statements and actions that are executed by the characters in the story that really jumpstart from that catalyst moment and really start to increase the tensions, or the tension between characters. Usually, protagonists, I'm going to abbreviate this, protags and antags. Okay. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you can have protagonists create these little catalyst moments, even with other minor characters, or characters that are in the category of being a protagonist. Again, we're talking about characters that are based on actual human traits, and we're being, all of us that are flawed. We don't do everything right from time to time, especially these heroes in the stories. They are fatally flawed and tend to create drama and tension needlessly, even between characters within their own groups. But the rising action is going to be a little different, because it's going to be a clear indication that the stage is set for a major conflict to erupt between the protagonist and the antagonist. Now, if you look back at Romeo and Juliet, you can see that the catalyst in that play was the moment in which Romeo and Juliet saw each other for the first time. Okay. Nothing major had happened at that point. There was really no conflict, but that catalyst moment, that striking of the flint, allowing those 2 characters to take sight of one another, really set the stage and created this conflict. Because what happened? Well, Romeo fell in love with Juliet. Juliet fell in love. Well, I say that term loosely. Again, I am of the camp that believes that Romeo and Juliet does not have anything to do with love. It was a warning shot by an aristocracy to remind, especially the new generation who was in control. But that's the topic for another class. But that moment that took place between Romeo and Juliet was that catalyst moment. And it really set the stage for everything else that happened in the play afterwards. Now, the rising action that started that was the motivations of Romeo and Juliet to defy their parents and to be with one another, regardless of what their opinions were. And when Tybalt got involved, that's when you see that rise in action really start to increase, because there's tension there between Romeo and Juliet, and then both of their houses, their families, trying to prevent this thing, especially Tybalt, trying to prevent this thing from taking place. Um, so again, you're going to want to keep an eye out for what is going to be the rising action that's taking place here in Hamlet. Um, that's one of the things that we're going to talk about over the course of the play, but it's one of the things that you're really going to want to look for when you're reading through the play yourself. Now, once you get to that rise in action, it gets to a certain point where like I said, the temperature within the pot, the boiling water, starts to reach a critical point. When things, start to boil over, that point is what we call the climax. Okay. And that's usually an event that sets this, it's an event that is the pinnacle that serves as the pinnacle for the maximum conflict here. Okay. So in the case of Romeo and Juliet, the killing of Tybalt could be argued as being the boiling point or the breaking point within that story, because of what Romeo did in killing the cousin of Juliet. That pretty much killed any normal chance that they had of being together. With his death, there's no way the Capulets were going to forgive him for taking the life of Tybalt. So that was going to kill any kind of possibility for those two to be together at that point. So one could argue in a scholastic sense that was a climax for that play. Another one could say that it was the moment where Romeo, or the moment where Romeo decides to leave and come back on his own and finds Juliet lying dead, supposedly dead in the sarcophagus. There are many different points where you have a lot of rising actions and climaxes and falling actions. It's almost like waves within that play. And you're going to see that here in Hamlet as well. So in this wave action, you're going to have this rising action that causes increased tension between the characters, specifically the protagonist and the antagonist. You're going to have that event, that climax, that serves as a pinnacle for the maximum tension and conflict between those characters. And then usually afterwards, you're going to have this, what we call a falling action. And that is the release of the tension after the climax. That can be, in some cases, catastrophic or fatal. Okay. Okay. So, again, in the three stages of conflict, we're looking at a rising action, a climax point where that like I said, it's almost like a pot of boiling water. It's just reaching that point where it can't take anymore and it pops. And then the water starts to boil over because the atoms and the molecules are moving at such a fast rate that's antagonized. But then once you turn the heat down, after that point, it boils over, then you see that falling action. Okay. And that usually happens in dramatic cases with people as well. Once they get all their frustrations out, once they get their negative energy out, once they get their anger and sadness and the tension out, you usually have this this calming period that happens after the pinnacle of the conflict. Okay. This falling action where things start to settle down a little bit. Now, that's not an indication that things are going to get better. Sometimes that's an indication that they're okay. There's just a rest point and then we're going to flare up again. Right. But usually you will see that last conflict, especially in the case of Shakespeare, one in the play group of the plays that we call his tragedies, that last rising action to the climax to the falling action is usually fatal and catastrophic at that point. Someone is going to die at that point or become severely injured, or all hell is about to break loose, not just because of what happens between the characters, but the whole thing. All right. And so again, drama, and we do have some other little minor elements here, much like poetry. You're going to see some symbols, especially in the case of Shakespeare, some symbolism, imagery, and metaphors, similes. Be on the lookout for those. Okay. And the reason why I say that is these little metaphors and similes and symbolism, they're going to give you indications, little subtle indications who the characters are and their motivations. Okay. Just like in poetry, all of these poets use certain symbols and images and stuff to kind of give you an indication of what the scene is, or what the prevailing thought was. The playwright's going to do the same thing. The playwright's going to use symbols and imageries and metaphors, especially in relation to the characters, to give you little clues into who they are and what their motivations are. And you're going to want to pick up on those, and you're going to want to make note of them, because in your analysis of the overall work and what you're wanting to say about Hamlet, those metaphors are going to be clear indications of character traits and flaws and motivations that really set or really demonstrate who those characters are and what their motivations are. Okay. And again, there's going to be a lot of symbols in Hamlet. One of the symbols that I can give you a little prelude to is the nature of the ghost itself. The ghost of Hamlet's father, so to speak, comes to visit him early on. And in fact, wait a second, I may have misspoke that. Yeah, he is called out as the ghost of Hamlet's father, but the ghost of Hamlet's father, you're going to see early on, is the symbol itself. And you're going to be asking questions about, is this ghost of Hamlet's father really Hamlet's father? Or is it an enemy force, or what we call the devil, playing on Hamlet's mind to cause him to go, quote unquote, mad at a certain point? Or is this just a manifestation of Hamlet's own insecurities because of what happened early on? So again, that instance of a character can serve as a symbol or a metaphor for something that is either internal or external that's driving the events of the story. So those are things you're going to want to make a note of. There are things that we're going to discuss in the class. So I guess going forward, what I want you all to do is to make sure with drama, more so than fiction and poetry, you're going to want to come to class. I know all professors say that, but in the case of Hamlet, it's going to be extremely important for you to come to class so that we can discuss the characters and the setting and the themes and the conflicts that are going on from act to act to act to act, because a lot of these things are not that self-evident, or your perception of those events may not be what was intended by the playwright. And you're not going to pick up on that unless you come in and get some guidance and instruction from me or from your fellow students. So over the next few weeks, I think it's extremely important for you all to make sure you come to class, take good notes. They're going to be extremely beneficial between now and the end of the semester for when you prepare for this paper, more so than it was in fiction and poetry. Okay. Because like I said, a lot of these things are not going to be self-evident because we're not dealing with a traditional type of tale where you are, have the presence of a third person narrator to kind of fill in the gaps for you. Okay. A lot of your analysis is going to be inferences that you draw on the words that are the dialogue that's being executed by the characters in this play. The dialogue that's going on between these characters are going to give you an overall image of what's going on with them, with the setting, what the conflict is, who the protagonists are, the antagonists, what the rising action is, etc. Okay. And it's not always going to be self-evident. So it's extremely important for you to come to class in the next several weeks, to take good notes and for us to discuss act for act what's going on in this play. Okay. Do I have any questions up until this point? Let me check the chat, see if anybody said anything in the chat. Wow, you guys are quiet this morning. Really quiet. Still adjusting to the time change, huh? Okay, so what I would like for you to do is, one, I'm going to capture these notes that we developed on this whiteboard, and I'm actually proud of myself because this whiteboard doesn't look too bad. I botched up other whiteboards before, but I'm going to clean it up and post it on the Blackboard for you so that we've got a set of metrics now, right? Going into this play called Hamlet, which is very, it takes some time to really digest and understand what's going on. But having these metrics beside us and in front of us is going to make it so much easier to digest and understand what's going on in this play. So I'm going to take a copy of this. I'm going to clean it up for you, and I'll post it on Blackboard today, along with this video. So you can go back and watch this video in case you missed something. There is a video that records the whole lecture, so you can go back and watch it at your leisure. And then what we're going to do when we meet next week, again, remember, we're going to meet back in the classroom next week. God willing that I don't get sick between now and then. But we will meet in classroom next week, and we will start talking about Hamlet using these metrics. And we're going to start off with Act 1 and 2. We're going to move through this pretty quick from week to week. So in the absence of having that full week of instruction, because we are in a hybrid format, I will come across things from time to time that I don't have an opportunity to discuss in class. I'll have a video for you to fill in the gaps from week to week. It's extremely critical for understanding Hamlet and being able to interpret it. So whatever we're not able to discuss in class that week, I'll fill in the gaps for you with a video and either post it on YouTube, or if it's short enough, I'll actually capture it and put it on Blackboard for you. Okay. All right. So again, we'll meet next week in our normal classroom. And what I'd like for you all to do is to when I post these notes, download them, print them out, put a copy of them on your desk, and go ahead and start reading Act 1 and Act 2 for Hamlet. And we will discuss those acts for next week's class meeting. Okay. So again, we have the chat here. We also have a microphone. Does anybody have any questions or comments for me? Everybody feel good that they've got a good measuring stick and starting point for Hamlet next week? Oh, good. Got one thumbs up. Oh, good deal. Okay. All right. Well, if nobody has anything, nobody has any questions. I hope you all stay healthy. Have a great week. Please continue to watch to check your email daily for updates for me or for new information. Also check the Blackboard. And by the way, I'm going to do my best to hide out because my wife is trying to drag me to the voting booth today, and that's not something I want to do. Um, and I don't want to go. So I'm going to do my best to hide out from here on through the rest of the day and try to get out of clear clear the mechanism, as they say, or lose the madness. So anyway, I hope you all have a great day, have a great week, and I'll see you back here next week. Thank you, Benjamin. I appreciate that. You have a good week too.